also um, like to remind everyone that I'm chairing this session from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabeg people and acknowledge and respect them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And I would like to ask all of you to take a moment just to pause and think about the traditional people of the territories that you're joining from and what that means for all of us and the lives that we all lead today. So, je pense que la plupart de la présentation sera en anglais, mais vous pouvez poser des questions et faire des interventions dans la langue de vos choix. Paul can understand and respond to questions in both languages, and the deck is in both languages, I believe. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Paul is going to go through the deck fairly closely, item by item, but overall, I mean, I think there are some very serious victories in a kind of a more holistic sense. And, some of those are things like a lot more enhanced, more flexibility for members and, being able to use the FSDs to respond to their particular needs without having to constantly seek exemptions and permissions from headquarters. A lot less intrusion in people's lives, less information being sought about personal situations, more scope for judgment and flexibility. And so, like not just item by item, but in that sense, I think that I know we're very happy with the way that this has all turned out. And this was one of our goals, with this round of negotiations, was to try to get things to a little more sensible, a little less burdensome, regime, both for our sake and frankly for the employer's sake, because it's a huge amount of resources and time and energy and goodwill that are spent on these things. And hopefully this will free up some energy and some resources that can be used for actually helping maintain good conditions for everyone when they're serving abroad. So, Paul, without further ado, I will turn over the controls and everything to you. I am going to turn my video off. I will keep monitoring. I'll monitor the Q&A in the chat for questions. We'll kind of group them together at the end in themes. And just one thing, I mean, you're free to ask whatever question you like, but be aware that Paul will not be able to get into specific individual scenarios in this session. If you have a question, about your particular family situation or something very specific, we encourage you to send an email to info@pafso.com. And then, it'll be forwarded to Paul or Monique, who is our other FSD advisor, and they will get back to you and talk about those specifics. So over to you, Paul. And I'm just going to be listening with my camera turned off here.
Great. Thanks, Pam. So just give me a moment, folks, for me to share my screen. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing the deck now. Pam, can you just quickly confirm that people can hear me and you can see the deck? All right, thumbs up. Great. So just a little piece before we get started. Thanks for all the thumbs up, everyone. I've structured the deck a little bit differently this time. It's very long. It's 73 slides, and I appreciate not all of you will be able to stay to the end. So I've basically front-loaded the deck with the most impactful, the most significant changes, and then move on to the other changes that are still significant, but maybe a little bit less impactful. Another point, there's lots of changes that we're not going to touch on at all today. And what I mean by that, there's all kinds of typos that were fixed, commas that were moved, sentences that were reworded to make them easier to understand. We're not getting into any of that stuff, in part because we don't have time, but also I don't think many of you will be that concerned about those types of changes. So the changes that we're looking at today are changes that actually impact you either positively or in a small number of cases potentially negatively. All right, here we go. So a little bit of context. So cyclical review is basically the type of negotiation process that's used at the National Joint Council, often abbreviated as the NJC. It's quite different from regular collective bargaining in a number of ways, but a big one is that whereas in bargaining, it's basically us, PAFSO, negotiating directly one-on-one with Treasury Board. At the NJC, there's multiple parties at the table. For the NJC FSD committee, which is the committee that oversees the FSDs, there is us, PSAC, and PIPS on the bargaining agent side, and TBS, GAC, IRCC, and D&D on the employer side. So all these various organizations work together to renegotiate and redevelop the directives. So this round started in 2023. We filed the proposals in the summer of 2023. Then there were a number of preliminary steps that took place over the fall of 23 and winter of 24. And basically, March through November last year, for the most part, we're at the table twice a week, 2 half days a week for that period. And finally, in the last couple months, basically February, the directives were signed off by the parties that needed to. So President of Treasury Board and the NJC Executive Committee. And another important point here, I'll be kind of referring to the recently negotiated directives as the new directives, and the ones that took effect back in 2019 as the old ones. But technically, the 2019 directives are still in force until April 1st. While the new directives have been published, they don't actually take effect until April 1st this year. Okay, so as I mentioned, I kind of divided the changes that we'll be discussing today into 2 categories, the kind of the bigger ones, which I'm calling particularly significant changes, and then the others that will follow. So we'll start with the bigger ones. So in the general section of the FSDs, there's now language added that allows the deputy head to cover atypical expenses. There were a number of occasions, particularly in the pandemic, but also outside of the pandemic, where the employer basically took the position, we'd love to help you, but there's nothing specifically in the directives that allow us to cover whatever it is you're asking to have covered. Well, there's kind of some broad language that's been introduced into the general section that basically allows the employer to cover almost whatever they want. It has to be related to foreign service, and it has to be something that an expense that wasn't created due to a personal choice or something, an issue that the employee caused themselves. And it's still discretionary, meaning the employer gets to decide whether they're going to apply this clause or not. But the point is that basically the employer can no longer use the excuse, sorry, we don't have any means to do this, because this new language allows them to, as I said, cover almost anything. So hopefully that will be helpful moving forward. There's been a change to the definition of dependent within FSD2. So just quick crash course. Basically, historically, there have been 3 categories of dependents in terms of people that reside with the employee at post. You've got your kids, you've got your spouses, and you've got your basically everyone else. And in that everyone else category, one of the more common examples has been parents. Unfortunately, it's often been challenging to get parents on a PCF and get them living with members at post. And there's been a few reasons, a few stumbling blocks that have made that more difficult. One is that the previous language tied the requirements to the requirements in place for common law partner status. And that's obviously problematic in that, there's not going to be a conjugal relationship between a parent and an employee. Also, the cohabitation period and the financial ties that were in place for cohabitation requirements were making it more difficult. So that connection has been removed now. So there's no longer a connection between the requirements for common law partner status and for a parent to be added to a PCF. The other piece that's changed is that the language used to say in order to qualify, the individual had to be already living with the family at post. Well, if you had a situation where there's been a change in the parent's health status. They were living in Canada. They used to be able to take care of themselves, but now they're no longer able to. Well, in that situation, they wouldn't already be living with the family at post. So the language has been adjusted to allow for situations where the person is not necessarily already living at post with the family. So the combination of those two changes, I hope, will make it easier for individuals who aren't children or spouses in general, but parents of employees in particular to come to post and be put on PCS. Okay. So we've also adjusted the requirements in relation to having someone designated as a common law partner. There used to be two, basically. One was a year of cohabitation, and the other was what was called financial ties. Financial ties was things like joint credit cards, filing taxes together, shared investments, joint bank accounts, those types of things. So financial ties has been removed as a requirement now. So the only requirement to have someone designated as your common law partner is the 1 year of cohabitation. So hopefully that will make things easier moving forward. I know a lot of members had quite a bit of difficulty getting partners designated as common law partners over the years. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction. Okay, so big change to FSD 15, which is the relocation directive within the FSDs. So basically, there is a new fund that can be created that we're calling the Flexible Fund or the Flexible Relocation Fund. And here's how it works. If you forego certain things, such as, for example, if you qualify for business class and travel economy instead, if you ship less than your weight entitlement in terms of household effects, if you don't put anything into an LTS, if you have a car and you don't ship it, if you do any one of those things or potentially more than one of those things, money is added to a fund which you can then use to cover certain other types of relocation related expenses. In terms of how much money, each of those things is worth a different amount, kind of in the 2,000 to 3,000 each range. And the way it's set up is you can accumulate as a single person up to 10,000 or as a family up to 15,000 that you can use for other things. Well, what are those other things? Well, the one that seems to be the most popular in terms of the members I've spoken with so far is pets. So if you forego one of those things I listed earlier, you can use that money to bring your pets with you to post. Other things you can use the money for, extra baggage, additional amounts for local transportation like car rental, and another thing you can use it for is bringing another person with you to help with the relocation. And the important distinction there is this isn't adding an extra person to your PCF. I'll provide an example. Let's say you're a single parent with 3 kids, or maybe you're 2 parents with 3 kids, whatever. And you feel it's going to be very difficult to travel with all these children, either on your own or with your partner. You could use money from this flexible fund to basically have someone travel with you to help you with the voyage. That wouldn't mean that they're added to your PCF and residing with you at post. Is just someone to help you with the travel. That isn't a all-inclusive list. You can submit requests for other things, but for the most part, that's kind of where this is coming from. So yeah, I'll say this for the first time. I'm probably going to repeat myself a number of times throughout the presentation. This is a brand new concept, brand new language, never tried before. I think the intent is great. I hope it works. I guess time will tell if there are, hiccups or challenges that develop when the employer starts to administer this. But yeah, if you run into problems, as Pam mentioned earlier, you can send an email to info@pafso, and yeah, someone will get back to you. Okay, another new piece that's in this kind of bigger category used to be, if you're cross-posting, you could request to do so via Canada, but that basically meant headquarters city only. So, as you're all aware, for FS, that's Ottawa-Gatineau. So we've got new language now that allows cross postings to take place via the last place of duty in Canada. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that before you went abroad, you were assigned to the Vancouver regional office. That's where your doctor is, that's where your banks are. And so it really makes no sense for you to come back to Ottawa, between posts. It makes more sense for you to come to transit via Vancouver. So this new language will allow you to do that, in that it's no longer only the headquarters city. It could be headquarters city or last place of duty in Canada. So translation of official documents can now be covered. I was kind of surprised to find out that it was not previously covered. My understanding is that departments kind of found ways around that, but anyway, now it's specifically covered by the FSDs. Connected to that point, I was surprised to learn that passport and related expenses for newborns when they were born at post was not previously covered. So basically, the approach that the department was taking before was that passports and related expenses were covered during a relocation, when a relocation was taking place. But if a child was born at post in the middle of a posting, the parents' options were to wait until the relocation to get official documents in place, or pay out of pocket. So hopefully that issue has been fixed now. Yeah, so you can now have passport and related expenses covered for newborns when they're born at post in the middle of a posting. Okay, so retiring employees. This one kind of was brought to my attention a number of times, and it was quite frustrating. So I'm glad we've got it fixed. So you may be aware that when you retire, if you retire at the end of a posting, the FSDs will pay for you to relocate basically anywhere you want to retire to, up to the cost of a relocation to the headquarters city. The problem with that was the language required that in order for that to kick in, the person had to retire specifically on their final day of their posting, meaning if they had any leave left over that they wanted to take after their posting ended, too bad. If they wanted to be relocated under the FSDs to the destination of their choice, they had to be officially done on their last day at post. Well, we've now fixed that. You're not allowed to take another assignment in Canada or elsewhere after your last day at post, but you can now finish your posting and then use up all your leave and then retire and still have the FSDs pay to relocate you to the location of your choice, up to the cost of a relocation to the headquarters city. Those of you that aren't close to retirement, that may not have crossed your mind before, but we had a number of members who were retiring that, this was a problem. So hopefully it'll be fixed moving forward. So many of you probably remember that relocations under the FSDs to and from telework locations used to be a thing. And then I don't remember when now, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. GAC stopped doing that. And if someone was working from a telework location, they became responsible for moving themselves, their families, their belongings to Ottawa-Gatineau, after which the employer would relocate them out to post. So that has been fixed now. We're not allowed to use the word telework in the FSDs, but new language allows relocations to or from locations other than the place of duty. So you can interpret that as you will, but basically, if you're working from a location other than your place of duty, you can still be relocated to or from post under FSD 15. The one thing I'll mention, though, is that some limitations apply in this case. Basically, you don't get the same full relocation package under FSD 15 if you're relocating to or from a location other than your place of duty relative to a normal relocation. Still get the airfare covered, your household effects are still shipped, vehicle is still shipped, but no long-term storage in those situations, and local transportation, no local transportation in those situations, and more limited time in temporary accommodation. Okay. This one's going to take a bit of explanation, and it may not apply to a ton of you, but I still feel it's impactful. So it used to be that if two parents who are parents of the same children but no longer a couple were posted to the same post, only the parent with the kids on the PCF would be entitled to accommodation that was appropriately sized to allow the kids to live there and sleep over. Well, we're introducing new language that will now allow both parents to request accommodation appropriately sized for the kids to sleep over. So both the parent with the kids on the PCF and the parents without the kids on the PCF. Now, this only applies in situations where both parents are posted to the same post, but I still think it's a step in the right direction. Okay, so this next one is also going to take some explanation, but another one that I think will be quite impactful. So the comprehensive healthcare coverage that you have when you're abroad is based on what's covered in Ontario. Specifically, though, it's based on what's covered by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, or abbreviated as OHIP. The problem with that has been that not every condition in Ontario that has coverage funded by the government of Ontario, it falls under OHIP. There's a small number, a handful of conditions that are funded via separate funding pathways. So paid for by the government of Ontario, but not under the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, something else. The biggest one of those seems to be care for children with autism. And the problem that that created is that basically, if our members were abroad and they had a child or more than one child diagnosed with autism, there was pretty close to zero support financially for them. Because again, the healthcare plan that you have when you're abroad is based on the Ontario Health Insurance Plan. And in Ontario, autism is funded separately. Anyhow, hopefully, this new language that we're introducing will address that issue. Basically, uh, anything that someone can demonstrate they would have qualified for in terms of financial support for their child with autism had they remained in Canada. Uh, the goal is that it'll be mirrored via FSD 34 while the family is abroad. Um, I'll put the same caveat on this one that I did earlier. This is a brand new thing, a brand new approach. The goal is to basically have mirrored coverage for those abroad with children with autism relative to what the support they would have received had they remained in Canada. But it's brand new. The employers never administered this before, so there may be bumps along the road. If that happens, send us an email. But hopefully this fills a big gap here. Okay, another one, health related. Used to be that if you obtained one or more vaccinations while abroad, while the vaccinations themselves were covered by your healthcare plan, there was still a copayment for them. And that was seen as unfair because many, if not the majority, of those vaccinations would be free had you remained in Canada, in Ontario in particular. Well, now the co-payments are paid for via FSD 39. So that's something new that we're introducing. Okay, next, another big brand new piece is something called the FSD Travel Bank. It's a brand new FSD called FSD 49, and it's completely changing how FSD 50 and 51 work. So it used to be that for FSD 50, which is the post-travel allowance, used to be called back in the day the vacation travel allowance, and 51, which is family reunion, you would qualify for a certain amount each posting or each year. And when you wanted to take a trip, there would be a back and forth with your FSD advisor in terms of the routing and the travel plan and whether it was a good rate and blah, 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 blah. All of that is gone now. There's no more bickering with FSD advisors about any of this. Under the new travel bank, every year, starting when you arrive at post, the amount you're entitled to for 50 and 51 will just be automatically deposited in your account. That's it. So when you arrive at post, the money shows up in your account, and that's your money for FSD 50 and 51 for that year. No travel plans, none of that. I almost said nonsense. I guess it wasn't nonsense, but none of that headache anyhow. So yeah, that's something new that we're introducing, that the travel bank. And there'll be a few other changes I'll touch on in relation to the travel bank as we move forward. Sorry, Pam, you have something?
Sorry. So I see somebody is asking. I don't have it on mine because I'm on Safari, and so I managed to change my view. But apparently, your head is in front of some of the slides on certain browsers. Is there anything you can do on your view to move?
Um,
I
I
don't.
don't know. Let's
Sorry. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't. I like on mine. It's controlled in my individual browser on. So I think it might be there.
I can move, I'm just playing with settings here. I can move my head around to different corners, or I can basically not have my head at all. So maybe I'll take my head off completely. Nobody really needs to look at me while I talk.
Well, and then you'll still show up in the like in the corner, I think, just not like right in front of your presentation.
Well, let's try it. I'm gonna try removing myself here, and people can still hear me hopefully. So let's try this.
Okay. Ah, there you are. Okay. Thanks, Paul. It's a thanks.
So is this better?
That is, yep, you're just showing for me, you're just showing in a small window off to the right. You're no
Okay.
longer in front of the bottom half. And I see a thumbs up, so looks
Okay.
like that's good.
All
Okay.
right.
Thanks.
So where were we? Yeah. So we mentioned that 50 and 51 will now be whatever you're entitled to for that year will just be deposited in your account and say two. Okay. All right. So did I miss one? Yeah, oh, yeah, 5611. So 5611 is the post-specific allowance. Some of you may not even be aware that you receive this, but basically how it works is they calculate they determine the cost of one economy return ticket from your post to headquarters and back. And then they divide that number into 12, and you get that 1/12 of an economy return ticket every month for that year of the posting. So you're no longer going to get those monthly installments via 5611. Like 50 and 51, the full amount will be deposited in your account once a year. So no more monthly installments, just one lump sum deposited into your account each year. Um, Another change. So there are a few city states where our members are posted, and they experienced a particularly a specific challenge during the pandemic in that it was difficult or impossible for them to leave their post and get a break, but there was no language in the directive that basically allowed for uh, what I'll call staycations. So using FSD 50 to, I don't know, go to a hotel or a resort or something at your post. Well, we've now introduced language to address that issue. Hopefully, we don't have another pandemic anytime soon. But anyway, staycations under FSD 50 are now possible subject to employer discretion. So basically, the employer gets to decide if they're going to allow it. And I don't think they'll allow it, in normal times, when there's no pandemic or other, extraordinary circumstance. But if there is another pandemic, that will now be possible. Okay. Last slide for our particularly impactful changes section here. So this is the last piece in terms of the big ones. A few related to children. First of all, attending the birth of a child has been moved from 41, which is healthcare travel, to 51, which is family reunion. The committee decided it was more appropriate to have the language there because 41 is really intended for the person who requires healthcare to travel, and 51 is to connect with family. So it's been moved there. But more importantly, we've now added language that allows both the employee and their spouse or common law partner to have expenses covered in relation to travel for adoption, including through surrogacy. Some of you may be aware that there was a big case with a decision from the labor board. How long ago was that now? Maybe a year or two ago. Uh, Anyhow, this new language stems from that basically to allow coverage for both parents in situations of adoption and surrogacy. So if you're pressed for time, we've covered the big stuff now, but that's not to say there aren't many other impactful changes. I think about maybe 50 to 55 slides worth. So we'll get into that now. So circling back to kind of to the beginning of the directives again, FSD 2, which is definitions, we've introduced a new definition of adult dependent children. There's basically been some problems over the years in that when people think about children, they think about minors, like under 18 years of age. But some of our members have children who are still dependents, but they're adults, generally because the individual has a disability. So we're introducing a new definition to specifically describe these types of people, and you'll see a kind of peppered out throughout the new directives, changes to language to hopefully make lives easier for members who have adult dependent children. So 3.7, FSD 3.7, is all about what support is provided when a posting is changed or canceled. Maybe you've sold your house and all your belongings have been packed up and taken away, and then your posting is changed or canceled. Well, 3.7 is what kicks in those situations to provide support. A challenge with the previous language in that area was that what if the posting isn't changed or canceled, the employee still goes, but the spouse or another dependent is refused entry into the host nation, perhaps for political reasons. Well, we now have language in FSD3 that will provide support in those situations. So some people may not know where to look in the FSDs in terms of where to find supports for employees or dependents with a disability or special needs. So we've introduced a list into FSD3 so people can just look there and see what FSDs may offer support for individuals with a disability. So this is this next one under FSD 10 posting loan is one of two changes to their directives that I'm characterizing as a potential concession. So maybe something that you might not be happy with that might make your life a little bit more difficult. So for posting loans, there's basically two kinds of payments. You've got your regular monthly payments, and that's not changing at all. That stays the same. But then you've also got an opportunity to make a lump sum payment, basically a one-time payment to try and bring down your balance. Whereas previously, the minimum amount for a lump sum payment was $500. The minimum has now been increased to $1,500. So the term post-dated checks has now been replaced with the term make the necessary financial arrangements. An obvious problem with the previous language that just said post-dated checks was that, not everybody has checks anymore. So, now you can repay your posting loan via, you can still use post-dated checks if you want to, but the new language kind of opens up to, other possibilities. So we're introducing some new flexibility in terms of how you get to post. Traveling by air, PMV, or sea was always those were always possibilities. But now you can mix and match if you choose to. So you could go halfway by air, halfway by car, halfway by car, halfway by sea, 1/3 by air, 1/3 by car, 1/3 by sea, whatever you prefer. Obviously you may have a certain date by which you need to be at your new post or your new assignment in Canada, and that needs to be respected. And this doesn't change the maximum amount of money you'll get via the FSDs. That will still be based on traveling by air, but at least now you have the flexibility to get from one place of duty to another, as you see fit. Again, within the confines that I've mentioned. So this one is maybe another kind of facepalm situation. So let's say you're at a post where you've got a lot of furniture with you and you're cross posting to a new place where they will not accept your furniture. Maybe it's a furnished post, maybe you're going into smaller SQ, whatever. Well, believe it or not, the previous language allowed the employer to either ship your excess furniture back to Canada or not. They could just say, sorry, we're not shipping your furniture back to Canada. And then, the employee or the member was stuck because, they have to leave their first post. The new post won't take the furniture. What are they supposed to do? So hopefully we've addressed that issue. The employer still has the option of shipping the excess furniture back to Canada or not. But if they choose not to, basically they'll have to pay for storage of the extra furniture at the new post. So I wish we didn't have to introduce that language. One would have thought that common sense, would have prevailed, but anyhow, we've got the new language in there, so hopefully that issue will be fixed moving forward. So in terms of your inventory, a few maybe more boring changes. Used to be that if you were grouping items together on an inventory, the maximum you could claim for them was $200. There's no longer a maximum for items grouped on an inventory. Used to be that if you had an appliance or some electronics valued at more than $1,000, you needed to get it appraised. Now that's no longer the case unless it's valued at more than $1,500. So again, small changes, but hopefully helpful. In terms of personally crafted items, used to be you needed an appraisal if it was worth more than 200. Now you need an appraisal if it's worth more than 300. So you can now request in advance on a post-specific allowance to help someone accompany you on your house hunting trip. So that basically means if you're in Canada and you're going to go on a house hunting trip, you've been approved for a house hunting trip, at post, you can request in advance on your post-specific allowance. So that's that 56.11 piece that we were talking about before to help pay for someone to accompany you on your house hunting trip. So another one that may not impact a ton of you, but I hope it'll be impactful. We've had a number of members over the years come back to Canada, have their belongings delivered, unloaded, only to find out that they were contaminated with mold. And one of the many problems with that situation has been there was no language in the directive that specifically addressed what happened in terms of support for temporary accommodation. Because if you've had items unpacked with mold in your home, it may not be safe to stay there. You may need to go into temporary accommodation for a while. Anyhow, we've got new language introduced into 15 that specifically allows for temporary accommodation to be covered when someone's effects are delivered with mold. Another perhaps facepalm one here. A number of administrators took the position that if a spouse came back to Canada before the employee, either they were not allowed to enter or get anything out of the LTS at all, long-term storage, or if they did so, the family would be charged a certain amount of money in order to allow for that to happen. So hopefully we're addressing that issue with this new language. Basically, a spouse if they arrive back in Canada first, can get into the LTS as long as they're taking out at least enough furniture required for a residence. And then if the rest of the LTS gets emptied when the employee gets back, there's no extra charge for basically accessing the long-term storage twice. All right, some more maybe boring ones here. We've moved the maximum amount reimbursable relative to changes in mortgage rates to Appendix B of FSD 16. The amount remains unchanged, but we've moved it to an appendix. Why, you might ask? Well, it's easier to change things that are in the appendices of the Foreign Service directives relative to the directives themselves. So this move will allow for the amount to be changed more easily moving forward. So the equity that you need in order to qualify for the default insurance premium coverage has been reduced from 25% to 20%. So hopefully that'll make it easier for members to qualify for this coverage moving forward. Okay, so this next one is the other that we may consider a concession, but for the reasons I'll get into, it's not really a concession, although some may perceive it that way. So the maximum amount of number of months that you could qualify for in terms of mortgage interest penalty was previously 6 months, and that's been brought down to 3 months. Why, you might ask? Well, the previous language said it was 6 months with the caveat that that number of months had to be adjusted to reflect what is in the NJC relocation directive, which is the NJC directive that's used for moves within Canada. Well, the amount in that directive was 3 months. So we were obligated, based on the existing language that required a parallel between those two directives to adjust the amount in FSD 16 down to 3 months. It's unfortunate, but that's the way that cookie crumbles. And I will note that there is not a requirement to adjust everything between directives to be equivalent between the relocation directive and the FSDs. Unfortunately, in this particular case, there was language that required that alignment. So at the time of relocation has been defined. It was previously kind of up for debate, and there was some discussion and in some cases some argument as to what the period of relocation or the time of relocation meant. So we've now pinned it down. It means the 12-month period starting when you get your PCF, basically. We've also pinned down or defined the term short notice. That term short notice was used in the directive, but there wasn't a set definition as to what that meant. So we've now defined it as meaning a period of 60 days or less between when you get your official notification of assignment, aka the PCF, and when you actually leave the old place of duty and depart for the new place of duty. I appreciate I'm kind of rapid fire going through these, but you may note that we're on slide 40 and there's 73. So we gotta keep on trucking here. Also, maximum amount for home inspection, a few changes there. firstly, we've moved it to an appendix for the same reason I mentioned before. This one has gone up though. It was previously $300. Now it's $500. Also, there's new language that allows potentially for subsequent or additional inspection in some circumstances, meaning not only has the amount gone up from 300 to 500, but it used to be you only got one home inspection no matter what. In some cases, you could potentially get more than one. Okay, so moving on to FSD 17. 17 is about support for spouses or common law partners. It used to be, in order to qualify for the supports under FSD 17, the spouse or common law partner needed to be employed within 1 year from their departure to post. Well, that's now been expanded to 3 years, so hopefully that will help out some people. So just to recap that, used to be within 12 months of your departure date to post, now it's 3 years or 36 months. So in terms of retraining courses, they used to have to be undertaken within the last year of the posting, basically, and now they can be undertaken within the last 2 years of the posting. So just allowing some more time for that retraining to take place. So FSD 18 provides certain supports when families are separated. Probably the big one is shelter waiver. So if a spouse remains home in Canada and the employee goes to post and they're maintaining 2 residences, most of you are probably familiar with the concept of a shelter waiver, where you basically the rent at post is reduced to acknowledge that the family is maintaining 2 homes. So the reason why someone could qualify for FSD 18, the list used to include school, work, or family. So if you couldn't leave Canada because of school, work, or family, you could qualify for FSD 18. Well, we're introducing a new reason, being discrimination. So if the spouse or a common law partner is expected to experience discrimination, perhaps due to their gender, race, sexual orientation, then they can qualify for FSD 18 on that basis. So last round, so when we've wrapped the round of cyclical review that led to the April 1st, 2019 directives taking effect and being published, it seemed like the biggest disappointment from members was the change we made in FSD 25. The number of bedrooms that you could be provided with while at post used to be a range pre-2019, and in 2019, that range was changed to specific numbers. At the time, I felt it was still going to be okay because what was described in 25 wasn't intended as a guideline, meaning open to a certain amount of flexibility. Unfortunately, that's not how HOMs and MCOs have been interpreting that language, at least from what I've heard. What I've heard is that language introduced in 2019 has been interpreted as basically set in stone absolute requirement amounts in terms of number of bedrooms. While that was never the intent, we were adding the word generally to the language now. And the intent here is basically to try and help people understand that there is some flexibility in terms of the number of bedrooms. So generally, these are the amounts you might receive, that kind of idea. I was hoping for more impactful language. Unfortunately, this was as far as the committee was willing to go. So I'm a little disappointed with this one, but I still think it's a step in the right direction anyhow. So believe it or not, if you're in an SQ with effects owned or leased by the Crown, it used to be your responsibility as an employee to insure those effects owned by the Crown. That's no longer the case. You still need to insure your own belongings when you're at post, but you no longer need to insure things that are owned or leased by the Crown. So a little bit of a bump in terms of seeking approvals for repairs or maintenance. It used to be that if you wanted to hire someone to conduct maintenance or repair, you had to seek approval if it was expected to cost more than $200. Now that amount has been bumped up to $500. So meaning if there's going to be some work done in your place that's going to cost less than $500, you can just file for reimbursement after the fact. You don't need to seek approval first. New language that may be a small thing that I hope will be impactful. Basically, we're introducing language that requires that corrective action be taken as quickly as possible when a major appliance is absent or not in working order. So I've heard stories over the years of members waiting too long, weeks, in some cases months, for this kind of work to get done. So hopefully this language will encourage that the work get done or the appliance get replaced in a more timely manner. So this one is another one that's going to require a little bit more explanation. So transportation of dependents with a disability at post has always been possible, but there's also been language that encourages transportation that is as economical as possible. And some people kind of perceive that as a disconnect. Well, if my child needs accessible transportation, why are you denying it because it's not the most economical? Anyhow, we're introducing new language to hopefully address that issue, to acknowledge that children with a disability are entitled to the accessible transportation that they require. Another one related to transportation. So there was some debate over the years in terms of round trips. And what do I mean by that? So in some cases, parents need to travel with their child to school. Some administrators had taken the position that in terms of covering transportation, you got one trip to school per day and one trip home from school, and that's it. That was obviously problematic because in most cases, the parent wasn't going to just stand there at the school all day and wait to take the kid home. The parent needed to get to work or back to their home. So round trips are now confirmed as possible within the directive to hopefully prevent that more restrictive interpretation. So it's possible for the parent to travel with their child to school, travel back home or to work, travel back to school to get their child, and then travel back home in those situations where it's important or appropriate for the parent to travel with the child. So lunch monitoring fees are now covered. Believe it or not, some schools charge an extra amount to basically watch the kids during the lunch hour. And this was an amount that was unfortunately being refused by the employer. They were taking the position that they weren't specifically required to cover that amount. So anyhow, we now have language in 34 that covers specifically lunch monitoring fees. Another change to 34, it used to be that tutoring would only be covered if the child had to change schools because of a relocation, so the parent is starting at a new place of duty. But we've now introduced language that allows tutoring to be covered in situations where the child had to change schools because of bullying or safety issues. So this one may also take a bit of explanation. So you can now use FSD 50 money to cover expenses related to a school field trip. So while there are some rare exceptions, for the most part, school field trips are not covered under FSD 34, which is the education allowances. But what you can do now is use some of your FSD 50 money to cover a field trip and then use the receipts from that field trip to help certify your use of the FSD 50. So here's an example. Let's say you got your FSD 50, you've used 70% of that amount for family travel, and you can certify 70% of the allowance. Well, FSD 50 requires 75% certification. So now if you have extra money left over from your FSD 50 and your child wants to go on a field trip with their school, and coverage of that field trip has been denied under FSD 34, well, you can allow your child to enjoy the field trip and then submit those receipts as part of your FSD 50 certification to bring you up to that certification threshold of the 75%. Hope that makes sense. So this isn't new FSD 50 money. It's basically if you have FSD 50 money left over and you haven't reached your certification threshold yet, you can use it for this purpose. So a positive change under FSD 35. So 35 is primarily used to cover the travel expenses when a child is leaving post to go to school in Canada. This usually happens when they're starting college or university. FSD 35 did allow a parent to travel with the child to, for example, help get them set up in their new dorm room at college or university. But the challenge with the previous language is both the parent and the child had to travel together. And if the parent couldn't travel with the child, it was too bad, so sad. If the parent wanted to come help later to help with the dorm room setup or whatever the case may be, they had to basically use FSD 50 money or pay out of pocket. Well, we've amended the language in 35 to allow the parent to travel separately from the child as long as it's within 5 calendar days. So if your child is about to start university in Canada and they need to be in Canada by a certain date, and you can't travel with them because you have an important meeting or event happening at post, you can still use FSD 35 to help get them settled at their new school as long as you travel within 5 calendar days. So moving on to 41. So 41 is healthcare travel. 41 has always allowed for a young child to, specifically the word young, a young child to accompany a parent requiring healthcare travel. So let's say, for example, you're a single parent and you need to travel under FSD 41 for some kind of procedure. If you had a young child, 41 would pay for them to come with you. The problem with that is basically teenagers were getting denied because a teenager, most people would not necessarily consider to be a young child. So what we've done to address that is introduce new language that allows other, not necessarily young children to accompany the parent subject to managerial discretion. So the idea is basically this. Maybe you've got a 14-year-old child and you have to travel for healthcare reasons for a month. You may not be comfortable leaving that 14-year-old child alone at post for that period. So you can now basically submit a short business case to request that to get approval to allow your teenager to travel with you for when you need to travel for healthcare purposes. So another piece under 41 that I hope will be impactful. So 41 healthcare travel has always been for acute or emergency conditions. So you won't get approved for 41 if you have a chronic, non-life-threatening condition that can wait. In those cases, the expectation is that you wait till you're back in Canada, or you wait to use FSD 50. The problem with that previous language has been that some people may need to travel for an urgent reason. Cancer could be an example. And then they need to go back and travel again for one or more follow-up treatments. That wasn't technically approved or approved easily under 41 before. We've now introduced language to make it easier for those follow-up treatments for acute or emergency conditions to be covered. Introducing a new managerial discretion provision within 41 for two reasons. One, to allow management to consider requests for employees to travel with children other than a young child. So this is that teenager travel situation I mentioned before. And then secondly, the employer can now consider authorizing additional expenses such as quarantine expenses, if there's another pandemic. Basically, the amount for 41 can be increased to reflect that. So FSD 50, it used to be that once you requested an amount to travel under FSD 50, that was the amount you were stuck with for that year. And if you had another child, or if you got married, or if you had a family member move in with you at post, it was too bad, so sad. The amount that you requested was your amount for that period of time. Now, you may recall that FSD 50 will be issued automatically to you each year via the travel bank. But in order to acknowledge that, basically FSD 50 amounts can now go up or down if your number of dependents with you at post increases or decreases. So basically the amount can change, can increase or decrease after it's been issued to you. For example, you get your FSD 50 amount, then you get married or you have a child. Well, you'll then get an additional FSD 50 amount to acknowledge the addition of that one dependent to your PCF. But the flip side is if you decrease the number of dependents with you at post, I don't know, maybe your relationship with your spouse or common law partner ends, or a child decides they don't like it at post and they move back to Canada, then in those situations, the employer could potentially claw back or recover some of the FSD 50 amount that you've already received. We've also introduced new language in FSD 50, and you'll see it I'll mention it for 51 and 54 as well, basically allowing the employer to increase FSD 50 amounts if there are quarantine requirements. New language in 51. So again, 51 is for family reunions. Some administrators had taken the position that there was a minimum amount of time required between family reunion trips. That has never been true, but just to drill the point home, we've added language to the directive to confirm that there is no minimum amount of time between FSD 51 trips. Okay. New amendment in 51 clarifying that both children and adult children with disabilities can travel with a person accompanying them. This is, again, part of our effort to make things easier for parents with adult children with disabilities. New amendment that allows traveling expenses to the location of a child with special needs is also, we're indicating that it's also possible in situations where the dependent with a child with special needs is an adult. Again, there was all kinds of confusion around whether these provisions applied. If if the dependent was an adult child with special needs. So we're clarifying that this is possible. And like I said, for FSD 50, for 51, there's now language that allows for 51 to be increased when there's quarantine requirements. We've amended 54 to include in the definition of a family union adult dependent children, another change intended to help people in those situations. Like with 50 and 51, we've added language to 54 to allow it to be increased in situations where there are quarantine requirements. Okay, less than 10 slides left. We're into the home stretch here. Thanks for staying with me. We're getting there. So the Foreign Service Premium, which is under 56, is an amount that you get based on your years of service abroad and as well as your family configuration. It's basically intended to encourage service abroad. It stops if you're more than 25 compensation days away from post. It used to start back up again when you arrived at your residence, but we've amended that language to allow it to start up again when you arrive at your post. So basically the city where you're posted. The rationale basically being that you may not be able to go immediately to your residence if there's public health restrictions in place and you have to quarantine. So this change will basically allow the Foreign Service Premium to kick in again earlier if there's another pandemic. So there are a number of basically optional things that the employer can do to support people that are posted to high hardship postings, and they're all listed under 58.5.1. There's a long list of them, but some of the bigger ones include like adding that bonus, so employees at a bonus level post get even more than the hardship level 5 normal amounts. Another one is the respite travel. Anyhow, the way that the language used to be worded, it kind of suggested that the employer could only provide one of the things from that list at a time. That was never the case. The employer could always pick and choose however many they felt was appropriate from that list. But anyway, we've amended the language to allow now for one or more, so it's clear that it could be many things on that list that are provided to employees posted to high hardship postings. Okay, we've also amended 58 to make it easier to quickly amend the hardship level of a post. Normally, to change the hardship level of a post, it has to go through a interdepartmental committee. It's a whole thing. It's a long process. There is now language being introduced that basically GAC can do it by itself in certain situations, providing that change is reviewed by the committee in a timely manner. So hopefully this will help in situations where there's a sudden change in hardship at one or more posts. The hardship levels can change more quickly in those cases. So this change under 58 is basically the same change as I talked about with under 56, in that the amount you receive for post differential allowance, often called the hardship allowance, stops if you're away from post for more than 25 compensation days. It used to start again when you got back to your residence. Now the change is it'll start again when you return to your post, or the city where you're posted. Again, the idea being that if there's another pandemic, this amount will restart sooner if there's a quarantine requirement. So under 64, which is the emergency evacuation and loss FSD, We had a number of challenges in the pandemic with regards to accountable advances. Basically, what's supposed to happen is if you're evacuated from a post and you had to leave some of your belongings behind, you can request that the employer provide you with an accountable advance, basically to replace the stuff that you had to leave behind. What has always supposed to have happened is each of those requests is supposed to be considered on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, I guess due to the sheer volume of requests, the employer took a one-size-fits-all approach to those types of requests, and that ended up negatively impacting a number of our members. And we actually have a case before the labor board that was argued about a year ago that we're still waiting on a decision for, related specifically to that issue. Anyhow, we've introduced language that confirms that these requests need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So hopefully, if someone else is evacuated in the future, within the context of a pandemic or otherwise, they'll be treated a little bit more reasonably if they request an accountable advance. Okay, another change in 64. So there's a provision in 64 that allows the employer to safeguard the belongings of someone who's been evacuated. Great. They can hire security to help protect or take other measures to help protect the belongings that have been left behind. The problem with that provision that came out during the pandemic was that some people were not necessarily evacuated, but were basically living in the mission or didn't have a lot of time to go back to their residence because a lot of other people were evacuated and they were, dealing with a small number of people left at post to undertake the work of that mission. So anyhow, we've now expanded the language in that the employer can now protect the belongings of both employees who have been evacuated as well as employees who have not been evacuated but are unable to monitor or care for their belongings in their residence. Almost done. So the option of selling a PMV to the Crown has always been there. Basically, if you leave your car at post because you're evacuated and you're not able to sell it or get it within 6 months, then there's an option that's provided to basically sell your car to the Crown. That option was only available for cars. We're introducing language that it's now available also for motorcycles in certain circumstances. And finally, this is our last change we'll be discussing today. So unfortunately, some administrators took an interesting position with regards to reimbursement of allowances. So for FSD 50, we'll use that as an example. You have to certify 75% of the allowance. So that means that if you are able to provide receipts that show you use 75%, there's no recovery. That money is yours to have spent or to spend. But if you only certify 70%, then you haven't reached that 75% certification threshold, so you have to return a portion of the allowance. Well, how I have always interpreted it, and what the correct interpretation has always been, is if we use that example of 70%, if you only certify 70% of the allowance, you have to return the 30% that you didn't use, that you can't certify. Unfortunately, some administrators were taking the position that if you don't reach your certification threshold, you have to return the full allowance, meaning if you only certify 70%, you have to return 100%. That was never correct, but unfortunately, some administrators took that position. So we've introduced language that says you only have to return the amount that you're unable to certify. So if you certify 70%, you return 30%. If you certify 60%, you return 40%, et cetera, et cetera. And if you certify 75%, you return nothing. Whew. Okay. Say two. That's it for my spiel there. So those are the changes. Again, we're not covering commas or typos or anything like that, but you've now heard all of the impactful changes, meaning changes that actually change what you qualify for or how they're administered and that sort of thing. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. I see lots of hands clapping and thumbs up in the little bubbles appearing there. So it seems like people are happy. I have to say that last one just amazes me. And that I think is another thing we got in there that like didn't we get something in there that says it's aggrievable like if somebody lies to a member or misrepresents a provision? Did we get that one in there or not?
We we tried, and
Okay.
that
I
was
mean,
not one that we got, but we did have a proposal in relation to that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's sad that that would be necessary, but I mean, that kind of thing just flies in the face of common sense. You know, I've been a Foreign Service officer since December 1993 on 6 postings, and I have to say, I've never heard of, you know, the accountability requirements being interpreted that way. The idea that you get $5,000 and you only spend, you know, 3,200 of it, and so you have to give back the whole 5,000. I mean, that's just not common sense, and it's sad that we have to get so legalistic about these things. But if we have to, then we have to, and I'm glad that we did. So I won't belabor that point. Um, we had a couple of questions, and there's a couple of them that kind of fall into some themes. So one of them, a couple about FSD 50 and asking how it will work if somebody is already on post but hasn't asked for their 50 yet. You know, should they ask for, like if they ask for it before the end of March, will it be under the current system? Should they hold off? I mean, you know, what if they're on a 4-year post or, you know, somewhere they only get one? Should they wait? Um, I
Yeah.
mean, do we have answers for that
So
or
the the short answer is no, but I'm going to take a stab at it. In terms of no, do I have an answer for it? That's not a circumstance that we really discussed at the table, but maybe we should have. I would suggest that the amounts are supposed to be provided in the new version annually, basically based on your arrival date at post. So maybe if you have one now, you could request it, and then hopefully there'll be another one come through if you're getting annual 50s, because the number of FSD 50s you get depends on your hardship level. Um, the other piece to that though would be if you're expecting a change in family size, may be better to wait, because under the old version, right? Once you got your FSD 50, that was it for the year. But under the new version, the amount can go up or down if your family size changes. I guess I'm not really giving a good answer here. Here's what I'll say. Ask the employer what their approach will be, and if you don't like it, send us an email and we'll have a look at it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess for some of this, they are going to have to figure out how they're going to manage it, right? Especially how they're going to manage the transition. And I mean, I could imagine that maybe there might, like, I haven't heard from them what discussion is going on in the FSD Bureau, but maybe for some, they might say, well, listen, if you're already on post for this year, you know, do this way, and you'll get the new ones starting in September, like when, you know, when other people are coming out on posting. But I think, you know, this is one of those areas where we're going to have to accept that there will be a little bit of uncertainty as they figure out exactly how they're going to administer this. And administering it is their prerogative, right? Like we don't step in and we don't co-manage them in that sense, right? We co-develop the provisions, but then how they implement it is up to the employer side.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, the important thing is, did you, by the end of your posting, get all the 50 and 51 amounts you were entitled to? When it's provided to you, I'm not sure that's as important as long as you're getting the amounts you're entitled to. So yeah, this will be an interesting one to look at. Hopefully the employer has an idea of how they're going to approach that. And like I said, if you're unhappy with the approach they decide to take, let us know and we'll have a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, so somebody's asking, like, if you don't get an FSD 50 every year, would you get it up front, like at the beginning of your posting, or do you still have to request it later in the year?
No, if let's take the example of you're getting one for your posting. My expectation, and again, we'll see what happens here because this is a new approach. My expectation is you'll get it when you arrive at post, and then it's your decision. Are you going to use it the first year, the second year, the third year, whatever?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it is going to require some management on the part of the employee to discipline yourself. Like when this money arrives in your bank account, don't spend it on something else, in the first year if you're not going to travel till the second year, because you won't get another one, and you're still going to have to account for you still have to show that you spent the money on what it was intended to do. I think we answered this, the 56.11, the
Yep.
option that taken as 10 days of leave, that's now gone, right? Like that's included in the
I wasn't expecting that question.
yeah. I that was my understanding when I read it, but I'm not sure.
The person who has that question, send me an email,
Okay.
paul.raven at pathso.com, and I'll respond. I'll have to check. I don't remember.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so that one is answered. Sorry, I'm just going through the things. Yeah, and we will still be audited, so you still need to keep your receipts and
Yeah,
so
none of the
on.
certification has changed other than the stipulation that, in terms of reimbursement, what you have to pay back.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so that's good. Flexible relocation fund, does one have to confirm in advance that they will use less than the 50% of 75% of shipment prior to pack up? Like, so do you have to commit that if you're doing your pack up and you realize, oh crap, I'm gonna have more, well, too bad, you don't get to pack it up, or can you see how much you have and then use the
Yeah, we didn't get that granular at the table. So I would say ask your FSD advisor, and if you feel that they're being unreasonable with the position they're taking, let us know.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. We've asked a lot of yeah, you covered actually quite a few of these questions. So someone's asking about trains. Would those be permitted under FSD 15 for part of the travel? It sounds like it, right? That's part
I
of
don't
it.
see
You
why
can
not.
mix.
I mean, we
It's ground
the whole
transport,
point here
right?
was to open it up to, people being able to travel as they wanted to. Again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the employer here, so I'll repeat myself. Ask your FSD advisor if that's something you'd like to do, and if they give you an answer you're not happy with, let us know.
Yeah, yeah. And someone's asking, so right now, I guess FSD 51 is more like a travel claim than a percentage, right, in terms of certification. So will it now be certified more like an FSD 50? Like,
So, good question. We didn't change anything in terms of the certification for 51, at least not that I remember.
because for 51, they have to use 100%, right, of
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
get for
yeah,
the purpose. So,
yeah. So
um,
you, that hasn't changed. So yeah, you'll be issued the money, and then
but
you
I
take.
guess what will they base the 51 on? Like, would they, because right now they base it on like your actual quote, right?
Yeah,
So if they're going to give you an advance without you requesting it, are they going to use the same amount as for a 50, or?
yeah, it'll be based on that amount. But like with 50 or 51, if there's some sort of, change in that, like those amounts are no longer viable, you can certainly go back to the FSD Bureau and say, hey, this is the amount I got. You know, I don't know, that airport no longer exists, or whatever. Like, there's been this
Yeah.
big hike in gas prices. You can always go back and request more, but it can't be because you know you know
But I
for,
guess, right, for like, because right now, I've never had 51 travel, so I don't have personal experience with this, but what I understand is like people have to do the cheapest thing, right? The like lowest available fares and all of those. So if they change it so that you can use the equivalent of a 50, which is the full fare economy or whatever that provision is, that's going to be a significant amount more
yeah.
per FS for each like family reunification trip.
Hmm.
So that's yeah, it's good for that for those folks, but it's gonna be a significant increase.
I'm gonna have to double check. Now,
Yeah, I think we probably should double
I
check.
don't want to lock
Um,
myself into something here that I'm not 1,000% on. So yeah, I'll check into it. Believe it or not, we're the new FSDs were published earlier this month, but we're still uh, not negotiating, but proofing the new methodologies. So I'll have to go back and have a look and see what we did there.
okay, a last question here. Somebody's asking, was FSD 46 changed? The post leave option?
I don't think so. Let me
No,
double.
I don't think that was one of the ones
No,
that had any amendments to it, so
yeah, I don't think so.
no. Okay. I see. Oh, another one. Um, if FSD does FSD 34 now cover cost for university age children not going to uni in the NRC? No, that hasn't changed. No,
No, that hasn't changed.
no. Okay, I did answer a couple of the ones while you were talking where I knew the answer from last time, so
Okay.
but they were covered in your presentation. So thank you. I really appreciate that you've stayed. It's been an hour and 35 minutes. Somebody had asked if we would share the deck. So what I said is I'll link well, I have a message coming out, a Friday message coming out this week. I was thinking we'll link to the YouTube videos and include the deck so people can just look at the deck if they want to. Um, what else? I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Oh, and I'll put a note in saying that the questions in this part are answered in like the last 15 minutes, just in case there was anyone who already went through a presentation and just wants to hear if there are any new questions or had to leave before their question came up. Um, but thank you. We really appreciate all the hard work that you did, and I think that these are some major improvements that will make life easier for people at Post. Especially, I mean, I'm happy to see the things for, like making it easier to declare adult dependence and, all of those kinds of things that will make it easier for kids with disabilities and issues like that may not affect a massive number of us, in terms of quantity of people, but really has a huge impact on the people who are affected. And I think that's, as a taxpayer, I think that's good use of taxpayer money to support things like that. So happy to see it, and thank you for everything that you did. And thank you, everybody, for sitting here with us and going through all of this. And thank you for your questions. And we'll see all of you at the next webinar, which I don't know when it will be, but we will have one. Okay. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Au revoir. Bye bye.